Hello, my name is Paul K. Chappelle. I am the Executive Director for the Peace Literacy Institute. And in the last video, we talked about viewing peace not just as a goal, but also as a skill set. And in this video, we will talk about the three elements of peace literacy. One of those elements is viewing peace as a skill set, and we will also talk about the other two elements of peace literacy. The first element we're going to talk about is viewing peace as a set of capacities. So think of language as a capacity, and children have the capacity to develop language. So very young children will pick up language from adults. But even though children will pick up language naturally from adults around them, we don't say in our society, well, children pick up language at a very young age. We shouldn't teach it in school. We teach language from preschool through college. And even after all that time, people can still have trouble with language because language is such a complex human capacity. In a similar way, empathy is a human capacity, and children have the capacity for empathy. And so much research shows that children are pan-empathetic. Children can feel empathy in all kinds of different directions for all different kinds of creatures. And this is why Disney and Pixar movies work. So children can feel empathy for Dumbo and Dumbo's mother and Bambi and Bambi's mother, and the toys in Toy Story and the cars in Cars, and Wall-E, a robot. And they can feel empathy for the monsters in Monsters, Inc. So they can feel empathy for monsters. One of my favorite cartoons as a child was called The Brave Little Toaster, about this anthropomorphized toaster. So there is a multi-billion-dollar industry based around the fact that children can develop empathy in all different kinds of directions. But even though empathy is a capacity like language, we don't teach empathy from preschool through college the way that we teach language from preschool through college. Furthermore, a lot of what children learn actually suppresses and smothers their empathy over time. So not only are we not teaching empathy, but we are actually teaching people things that smother and suppress their empathy. So in our society, we make the mistake of using the word thinking to mean only reason. But these capacities, such as empathy, can affect how we think as much as reason can. So think about empathy as a capacity. Empathy can affect how we think as much as reason can. If I think about you with empathy, and I view you with empathy, I will think about you much differently than if I have no empathy for you or if I have hatred toward you. So the way I perceive of you and think of you can be influenced as much by empathy as it can by reason. Now, we have other capacities that also dramatically affect how we think as human beings. For example, conscience dramatically affects how we think as human beings. Conscience affects how we think and how we reason. And think of integrity as an aspect of conscience. A person who has conscience and integrity will think much differently than a person who doesn't have conscience and who does not have integrity. Another capacity that changes how we think dramatically and affects how we think dramatically is imagination. So imagination has a huge impact upon how human beings think. And if you think about Einstein's theories of relativity, special and general relativity, a lot of that came more from his imagination, his ability to perform thought experiments in his imagination than his reasoning ability. So our ability to imagine has a huge impact upon how we think and also how we solve problems. Hope is a capacity that we can develop. And hope has a huge impact upon how we think. In peace literacy, we talk about the difference between realistic hope and naive hope. Realistic hope being active, naive hope being passive. And a person who has realistic, active hope will think much differently than a person who has naive, passive hope. And a person with realistic hope will also think differently than a person who feels hopeless. Another capacity that dramatically changes how human beings think is curiosity. Curiosity can also change how we think. Being open-minded can change how we perceive information, how we interpret information. And being closed-minded can also affect how we perceive and interpret information. And think about young children. From a very early age 3 and 4, they're very curious. They're asking questions. They're asking so many questions adults can get annoyed with them. And then many of these children, by the time they're in high school, they become disinterested in learning because that capacity has not been developed and has been smothered over time. Appreciation also dramatically affects how we think and how we reason. So we talk about in peace literacy how the highest expression of appreciation is stewardship. So if I view you through the lens of appreciation and stewardship, that will change how I think dramatically. If I view my surroundings, my life, my health, the people around me through the lens of appreciation and stewardship, that changes how I think about all of those things versus having no appreciation, no sense of stewardship. And if you are in a vulnerable position, you would probably much rather have me think about you with empathy and conscience and appreciation and stewardship than to think about you without those particular capacities. Discipline also dramatically affects how we think. Discipline, the ability to focus the mind and concentrate, has a huge impact upon how we perceive information, being able to process information when we can focus and concentrate our mind. Reason also is a capacity that we can develop over time, and it affects how we think. Reason is certainly important. We aren't saying that reason isn't important. We are just saying that reason is not the only important thing. It's not the only important capacity. All these other capacities can affect how we think as much as reason can. And then language is also a capacity that affects how we think. When we give words to things and we have a vocabulary for things, that changes how we can think about things. So think about all these capacities and the need to develop them from an early age. And let's say that we have a human being who has very strong language ability, very strong reasoning ability, strong imagination, and strong discipline. They're a hard worker. What if a person has language, reason, imagination, and discipline, but this person has no empathy and no conscience? What kind of person do you have? So think about Hitler, for example. Hitler was really good with language, very effective speaker. He was a hard worker, right? Gandhi even said, we need to work as hard for nonviolence as Hitler is working for violence. Why is Hitler working harder for violence than people are working for nonviolence? Hitler also had reasoning ability and imagination, yet he lacked empathy and conscience. The point here is that if people develop some of these capacities, but don't develop other capacities, they can become very, very dangerous. So in our society, where we teach people language ability in education and we teach mathematical reasoning, but our society in many ways suppresses people's empathy and suppresses their conscience, and even in some ways could suppress their appreciation and sense of stewardship, you can generate dangerous people through the education system by not cultivating all these different capacities. Now, you don't just need these capacities. We talk about these capacities as being like muscles, and you can make the muscles stronger over time. So you can strengthen your muscle of discipline. You can strengthen your muscle of hope and curiosity and empathy, conscience, appreciation, etc. But you don't just need these muscles, these capacities, which will atrophy, by the way, if you don't use them. You also need skills. So imagine a basketball player. What if a basketball player has very strong muscles, very good muscular endurance, but they have no skills? They will not perform well. What if a basketball player has skills, very good skills, but they don't have the muscular endurance or the muscular strength? They will not do well in basketball. So we don't just need the capacities, the muscles, we also need the skills. We need the skills through which we can express these different capacities. We need the skill to listen with empathy and a number of other skills that we talk about in peace literacy for solving all different kinds of problems at the personal level, community level, national level, and also the global level. But we don't just need skills and capacities. We also need accurate understanding. So imagine if a basketball player has very strong muscles, very good muscular endurance, and they have the skills, but what if they don't know what the rules of the game are? What if they don't know how the game is played, or they don't understand the mechanics of the game? They will not do well. So let me just talk very quickly about the importance of accurate understanding. So George Washington, his last days of life, he woke up one morning, he had fever and inflammation. His doctors bled him 4 times. He lost 80 ounces of blood, which was 40% of his blood volume. So people back then, many doctors believed that when people had a fever, you would cure the fever by removing people's blood, that their fever was being caused by excess blood in their body. And George Washington lost about 40% of his blood volume from that inaccurate understanding. So George Washington's doctors meant well. They had empathy, they had conscience, they had medical skills, but they did not know what caused fever. And this reminds me of the saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. If you have the muscles of empathy and conscience, but you don't know what causes illness, or you have an inaccurate understanding, you can actually make the situation worse. So we need all of these different layers. We need accurate understanding, we need skills, we need capacities. And two of the problems that occur in our society is, one problem is that people do not understand or emphasize the importance of teaching empathy and conscience. And another problem is that people talk about empathy like it's a magic bullet, like all you need is empathy, like empathy is going to solve everything. So let me just give you an example of that. In Peace Literacy, we talk about how a higher expression of empathy is unconditional love. But we need more than just love to solve problems. So imagine empathy, the muscle of empathy, love, being like your calf muscle. And you're playing basketball, and your calf muscle is very important. But you need more than just your calf muscle to play basketball well. So imagine when people say, all you need is love. Imagine if you were playing basketball and your basketball coach said, all you need is calf muscle. Or imagine if you're playing basketball and you're down 20 points in the game and you say, coach, what do we do? And when people say, love is the answer, imagine if your coach said, calf muscle is the answer. Certainly, your calf muscle is important. Certainly, empathy and love are important, but you don't just need empathy and love to solve problems. You need reason and imagination and discipline and conscience and appreciation and stewardship and hope and curiosity. You need skills through which you can express that empathy and love and use it to solve problems. And you need to accurately understand what causes problems. And when you look at problems in the 21st century, so many problems at the community level, national level, and global level, you can see deficiencies in these capacities. You can see deficiencies in people's skill level, and you can see deficiencies in accurate understanding in terms of what's actually causing the problems at the root level. And again, in terms of capacities, we are actually teaching people in many ways the opposite of what would be conducive to empathy, conscience, etc., flourishing. So in Peace Literacy, we need to develop all of these different levels, capacities, skills, and accurate understanding. And we will talk more about that in the next video.